When I first heard about it, well, first of all, I'd like to do a big shout out to Max and Will. The first time I met them was at a community meeting in Arvada. And since then, Will kind of gave us a rundown of, what was going to be happening. And it scared me because I thought about, our water, the water that, we use pretty much for everything. It was, really peaceful out there, really, really peaceful. It was quiet, but now it's just all, slowly getting torn up. The lithium workers are out there and they're digging the water pipes to place those in there. And, my son and I, we've been out there, we've been watching them as they, slowly destructing the place. My son flies drones, so yeah, we've been getting some clear shots of, what they've been doing.
When we're talking about mining on public lands in the United States, there's a law, the 1872 General Mining Law, which makes it so that if a mining corporation locates valuable minerals on public lands, then the federal government has to give them permits to mine. This is not a discretionary thing. If there's valuable minerals there, the Congress has said that the highest and best use of American public land is mining. That trumps Native American spiritual uses. There have been numerous examples of literally the most sacred places in the world to various Native American communities being destroyed because of the 1872 mining law.
Because of the reasons, how, our ancestors were massacred out there, I'm sure that they had left, their tools, the things that they used to hunt with, the things that they used on, their everyday life, they left them behind, and I'm sure that they're out there.
Thacker Pass, or Peehee Muhu in northern Nevada, is a place where Paiute people were massacred and where people lived and hunted and gathered their foods and their medicines and traveled through for thousands of years. This place is under threat right now. The mining company Lithium Nevada is building a giant open pit lithium mine here.
The approval was given 4 days before Trump got out of office in a 9-month rush NEPA that went through during COVID.
They never did come down and consult with us about what was going on up here.
To produce 1 ton of lithium, you need 500,000 gallons of water. We're the driest region in the nation, and they're here trying to steal and take away and pollute and destroy our waterways.
We don't want our water to be contaminated.
So this teepee has been set up in the way of this water pipeline.
We're asking people of prayer to come and stand with us, be strong with us.
We need people to come out here and help us. That's why we're reaching out to other people.
I want to say something a little bit about Sam. We are descendants of him. There was a massacre here, 2 massacres here in 1865, and Sam escaped this massacre riding on his horse to the north towards a place called Disaster Peak. He survived that massacre and went on to tell his story about how his people were killed on their land here. We stand here and in prayer to protect this place, ancestral burial ground.
Why is it that the federal government can come in and force a project over local communities, over the objections of local communities? That doesn't seem very democratic to me.
How do we feel about it?
Yeah.
Well, we don't want it. We don't like it. My whole family is against it.
Climate change is real, and we absolutely have to cut carbon emissions. And a lot of people that, believe in what I call so-called green energy are really concerned, and their hearts are really in the right place. But what's never questioned is this whole way of life, this whole consumptive way of life that's hugely energy intensive. We never ask, like, do we need to slow down consumption? Do we need to learn to live with less? We just look to new technologies to try and keep this party going on a little bit longer.
When our ancestors were massacred out there, their bodies were just left out there, because back then, way back, I don't think they put up funerals and dug graves and put the bodies in there. I always tell my aunties that the ground, the weather, and everything, the bones just eventually seep into the ground, or whatever was left out there, by the rains, the corrosions, or whatever. And maybe they didn't look in the right places, and it would be good to have the land surveyed up there properly, because I'm sure that that they will be able to find something out there, because it's a big massacre site out there.
The U.S. moved through as the cavalry came through, and settlers and gold rushers came into California and Oregon. They passed through this area, and they flooded into California. And they took over California, and they destroyed the homelands and the foods, and took the lands of the Pitt River Indians, and they started pushing them east, colliding here with the Paiute Shoshone. And skirmishes and fights over food and land as it was all taken in California. And there could have been, longer, older rivalries. But there was a massacre here of the Paiute people, right here in this valley, and particularly what you see is the marker, which they call Sentinel Rock. This is a sacred area, and this is where they could see all of the valley below, and they held ceremonies here and gathered food. So while the village was here, and hunters were out hunting on the other side of the valley, they came in, and the Pitt River people came in and massacred the people of this valley, the women and children, and they cut them open and spread their intestines throughout the sagebrush. And you can see it's kind of it's the shape of a moon. It's kind of a crescent here where it goes through the pass. And so this was called Stinking Moon because of the smell in the valley from the massacre. And so it's called Peehee Muhu. Peehee Muhu. And it's had that name. And it had that name when then in 1864 or 65, the U.S. cavalry came in. And on the other side of Sentinel Rock here, down in the valley across there's a river in the valley. The cavalry set up and came in and again massacred people. 30 to 60, 70, they're not sure. So basically there's 2 massacres that have been on this site. 2 massacres of the Paiute Shoshone people. During the lawsuit, the BLM ignored that. They hid the paperwork. They said they were making it up, that this wasn't sacred land in the lawsuit. And in the lawsuit it was uncovered that they had their own internal documentation that they knew. They knew that this was a massacre site. They knew that this was sacred ground. They knew that what they said, that this was, they're just making up that this was sacred, that that's not true. And they admitted it a month ago or 2 months ago and said, well, you might be right. This is sacred. But it's over there where the acreage is. It's not right here. It's kind of, there are remains strewn all over this valley. The people had never been buried. I'm sure when they dug up this road, they dug up remains and just pushed them out of the way. And there's a letter in the lawsuit from the director, I believe, of Sand Creek, the National Monument or Park. I'm not sure if it's a park. I think parks are Indian things. The Custer's, the Bighorn is a monument, but I think the parks. But Sand Creek, the site there, said that this was a massacre site. This was a sacred site, much in line with Sand Creek. I venture to say that it's perhaps more than that because of the dual massacres that went on here.
The Thacker Pass project would destroy a literal modern-day museum to Paiute culture. One of the sort of official legal terms for what Thacker Pass is a traditional cultural district, meaning it has a number of sacred places and sacred districts within the traditional cultural district. There were 2 massacres that happened in Thacker Pass, one of which was conducted on September 12th, 1865, and it was carried out by members of the First Nevada Cavalry, which were a federal cavalry regiment raised during the Civil War. And this massacre was conducted as part of what's called the Snake War. And the Snake War was a war fought by Great Basin Indigenous Peoples against primarily mining interests from invading their land. So in 1865, you have at least 31 and maybe as many as 70 Paiutes massacred in Thacker Pass. Now in 2023, the government is going to destroy the evidence of that massacre. So the very federal government that killed those Paiute people are now going to erase the evidence that it ever happened.
You know, leave Thacker Pass be, because over at Sentinel Rock, which overlooks the valley of Orvada, is one of the sacred sites out there. So we can continue going out there and offering prayers. BLM, one of the places that we pray at Thacker Pass, BLM had locked up the gates and everything, so we don't have any access to that site anymore.
And I just really wish people could see that more clearly and understand that when you're advocating for things like electric car batteries, then you're also advocating for genocide.
They've got heavy equipment and various materials staged down below Sentinel Rock here. All this is in the location where the September 12th, 1865 massacre began. That massacre then spread out to the west as people fled from the soldiers and went deeper into Thacker Pass. And almost along their route, we can see this swath continuing, this bulldozer track continuing across the landscape. It's hard to see from up here without binoculars, but out here more towards the middle of Thacker Pass, there is a lot of activity going on. Workers are just starting to arrive for the morning, but there are bulldozers, dump trucks, graders, excavators, bucket loaders, piles of large pipe, other equipment, staging areas. There's permanent installations starting to go up And maybe 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 acres of healthy, old growth sagebrush habitat that has already been bulldozed, that has already been destroyed, scraped clean.
We have a lot of our traditional things out there, the medicinal plants and the food that's out there. It's important to us. Yeah, we teach our children as they're growing up, telling them what's out there and how to do things, prepare things. That's the main thing, you know, one of the main things that they need to know that.
So if you go to any of the government's public-facing documents, documents like what they call the draft environmental impact statement, the final environmental impact statement, the record of decision, and then other documents more specific to cultural resources like the historic properties treatment plan. In those documents, BLM reported that they had been consulting with 3 tribes since 2017. Those 3 tribes were the Fort McDermitt Paiute and Shoshone Tribe, the Winnemucca Indian Colony, and the Summit Lake Paiute Tribe. Well, there's no documentation in the administrative record, which is all the documents that the government keeps and prepares to prove that it complied with its obligations under the law. There's no record of this consultation in the administrative record ever happening. And what's worse is once the project was finally permitted and the tribes were back after COVID, so the permitting process for the Thacker Pass mine happened throughout 2020. The tribes were particularly hard hit by COVID.
So are you learning more about your culture now as this is going on? Are you studying and talking to elders and those kinds of things more to get things?
I just listen to them talk about our cultures and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned from that.
The Bureau of Land Management possessed in its own General Land Office records survey reports from the late 1860s, where a U.S. deputy surveyor described the September 12th, 1865 massacre, described where he found remains of that massacre, and the Bureau of Land Management never produced these records, never told anybody about them. And now when we have pointed, we've pointed this out to the Bureau of Land Management, they have finally agreed that there should have been a discussion about that. But they're trying to limit where the massacre site happened to a small part of the project area in an attempt to say that they don't have to slow down construction of the mine, that the whole mine will not disturb the massacre site. And this contradicts all the accounts of where the massacre happened. It also contradicts the way a massacre site actually functions within a living community. You don't go to the battlefield at Gettysburg and think that the only places are sacred are the exact places where each individual soldier fell. In order to understand the battlefield at Gettysburg, you need to understand the roads that the different units approached the battlefield from. You need to understand places like where was Robert E. Lee sitting on a horse evaluating the field for a battle like this. The same thing is true of a massacre site, especially when the accounts of this massacre site describe so many of the landscape features in Thacker Pass that will be destroyed by the mine. So if you're going to take a Paiute child up to Thacker Pass and try to explain the massacre site, you would have to include all of the things like the Montana mountains on the north side of Thacker Pass, the approach that the soldiers took from the river, the likely routes that survivors took. You would have to talk about things like the soldiers saying that they never made a search of the bodies because, and the reason they didn't do this comes from another newspaper article describing another massacre in the Paradise Valley, which is close to the Quinn River Basin. But that newspaper account, after describing a massacre, explained how often you would find dead Indians several miles from where a massacre happened. And they said it's because these Indians, quote, can take an astonishing amount of lead before crawling off to die. You would have to picture, okay, let's say the camp was in one place. All the Paiute ancestors would have run in these different ways. And you have to think about the way someone who just got shot several times would be trying to get away and where they would fall. And it's with the Thacker Pass lithium mine going on, you go to the massacre site and now you're just going to see this huge open pit. You're going to see all the mining activities. Of course, you'll be forced to remember that 160 years ago, it was exactly this kind of thing that those people were murdered for back in 1865.